Welcome back. Thank you for listening. This is episode 22, continuing the discussion that we had with Tynz Hampton, discussing recording and mixing. I just want to take a quick moment to thank you guys for listening. It means a lot to all of us here at the Fret Buzz camp. If you've got a moment, go over and give us a review on iTunes. It helps us and gets the word out. And don't forget to check out our blog as well. In addition, hop on over to fretbuzzthepodcast.com and drop us a line. Let us know how we're doing and what you think. All right, let's jump back into the conversation where we left off last week for part 2, recording and mixing with Tynz Hampton.
Well, let's keep going with this mixing process and back to the drums and the bass and everything. If you're sitting down to mix, I mean, when I was starting to go into the studio, I didn't understand why an engineer couldn't tell me how much it would cost to mix a song. I didn't know. I didn't understand what went into mixing. I didn't understand that every song was different. But having seen that process, I now completely understand why it may take an hour. It may, if you want a quick mix, you could do it quick. But if you really want somebody to mix your stuff well, it could take hours. And so, like, going through that process, I'd like to talk about the process of, starting with the drums and then moving on to the bass guitar and bringing in your rhythm instruments and, setting the lead guitar part and the vocals on top, as icing on the cake.
Yeah. For me, Joe, generally, again, I hate to give you the generic answer, but it does depend on the song. What I usually will do is listen to, just the recordings or pre-mix or rough mix, of the song. And I'll listen to it, maybe 2 or 3 times before I get started. That's something, that as I grew as an engineer, I learned the value of that. And the reason is because for me, when I'm working through any process, I like to tackle what's most difficult first. So if I hear a lot of challenges, say from the drums, say I hear that, I feel like the drums are, kind of a bad recording or, they're not great, but I have to work with what I have to work with. I like to tackle what's most difficult first. Sometimes that's the vocal. Sometimes that's the separation between the vocal and say guitars or horns or, anything else that may be, in the higher frequency ranges. I like to tackle what I find to be most difficult first, because what happens is, for instance, let's say it's a pop song and I have, a drum track that the producer basically just, pieced together sampled drums that already sound good. I'm probably going to mix those drums last because I know that's going to be a fairly simple thing for me to do because they already are, most of those sample sounds are already boosted. Some of them are already even mastered. So it's not a lot, that I can do to make them better. I'm going to EQ them and put them where they belong in the actual song. But, it's not a lot that I can do to those. Vice versa. Let's say it's a live band recording. Normally with a live band recording, one of the first things I do is mix my drums and get those nice and full, just so that it can actually carry what we're doing for the rest of the song. If it's a vocal issue, let's say that you got vocals, you got background vocals, you have multiple people singing background vocals. Sometimes you may have a weak link in that chain, and you don't want to tell the weak link that they are a weak link, but sometimes you may have a weak link in that chain. So, what you're going to do in that situation is, perhaps tackle those first. There's another reason why I tackle what's most difficult first, and that's basically what we just said about your muscle getting tired. I tackle what's most difficult first while my ears are as fresh as possible. And that way I can, go in there, let's clean that up, fix that up, because I know the rest, not to say it's going to be easy, but it's going to be a little bit better flow to the rest of the work than it is, to what is most difficult in that mix. What provides the biggest challenge to you. That's usually what I suggest people to start off with.
So if you were going to mix drums first on a song and you want to make them big and full, how would you do that for listeners?
I take the exact same approach because, the drums are, you have 8 to 10 to maybe even 14 tracks, that are just drums. So I'm going to take the same approach that I look at for the overall master. It's all breaking it down into segments. So I'm looking at the overall mix. What's most difficult? Okay, drums. So, you know, if the drums are the most difficult part of that, then I'm going to look at the drums and say, okay, what's most difficult here? Do I have a strong snare drum? Is my snare drum weak? You know, does the snare drum pop already, or do I need to put a lot of work onto that snare drum? For me, my process from there, usually with drums, is I'm going to work on the kick and, you know, round the bottom off on the kick a little bit, you know, sweeten it up a little bit. And then I'm going to bring in the snare and make sure that I got a good contrast between those two instruments. After that, a lot of people will go to the hi-hats or toms and everything. I go straight to my overheads. The reason why I go straight to my overheads is because I feel like the overheads provide kind of that balance. And, you know, basically, if you've got good overhead recordings, what you're really doing is taking those overheads and you're going to sweeten those up with each individual sound. So, you know, I'll go from the kick and snare and see how that sounds with my overheads. Maybe take the overheads off, work some more on that kick and snare, bring the overheads back in. You know, and then sometimes also, like I said, with hi-hats, toms and things like that, just to save time, I'll generally go to a part of the song where there is a drum roll. And that way, you know, and just put that on loop. And that way I'm not fatiguing my ears listening to the whole song all the way through, waiting for these toms to come back in. I'm just going to put that portion on loop so I can listen to it and get a loop going on that, where as much is going on as possible within that loop. And that way you're not waiting on parts while your ears are getting tired or getting fatigued.
Yeah. And so for our listeners that haven't done this, you know, there's going to be a mic on almost every individual drum. And then there's also, you know, there might be two mics on a drum. You might have a mic on the top of your snare, a mic on the bottom of the snare to get more of the actual metal snare sound. You might have a mic in two different places on the kick drum, but the overheads are going to sit over top to really get the sound of the cymbals. But you really hear everything from them.
Exactly.
They're typically mics that pick up the high frequencies well for those cymbals.
Yeah. And you know, for me, the overheads will generally provide you with I don't want to say a guideline, but it kind of tells you, you know, okay, ambiance wise, what is my room giving me? You know, because like you said, you have mics directly on drums. Those are pretty easy, you know, and not to say that they're easy to mix, but they're pretty easy for you to hear and know exactly what's going on right away. Overheads kind of tell you, what is the room doing? You know, what is the room bringing to this mix? What is the room adding to the mix? What is the room doing to my frequencies? And then, you know, when you start to bring in those individual drums and put them on top of the room, you know, that's kind of why I mix it that way, is because it gives you kind of that baseline to work off of, where, okay, now I have my kick drum, my snare drum, I can put my hi-hats in. How does that sound with the room?
Yeah.
Because you're going to have, the room is going to be a part of your mix at all times anyway. So you got to make sure that your room is sounding tight. Do I need to EQ off some of that top frequency because I'm getting too much, you know, of the semblance from hi-hats and crashes? So, you know, that room will tell you everything, you know, right away. And you can always take it out of the mix while you're mixing individual drums, but you want to bring it back in frequently so you can hear what the room is doing to your mix.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a huge, I mean, working with tons of people, tons of artists, tons of engineers, there's many ways to go about mixing. You can, taking it all the way back to where we started from, you could start with drums. I know a lot of people who, you know, like you were saying, Joe, start with kick and then move on to bass and move on to there's also a school of thought where instead of starting on an individual basis, you start from something which is called a top-down mixing perspective, and you kind of think of it as a funnel, where on top of the funnel you have all your individual tracks, and then underneath that you have all your buses, and then underneath that you have your master fader. And the top down is actually kind of flip that on end, where you kind of look at your master fader first and you start mixing from your master fader, and you start adding tiny bits of compression, tiny bits of EQ, and kind of going at it like that, because most often if you're having a dull mix, all you really need to do is just brighten it up just a little bit, or take your low end and kind of just boost it just by a dB or two. And that changes your overall kind of mix from the get-go. And then from there, you go to your submixes and you start actually kind of EQing your submixes and compressing your submixes. That way, when you actually get down to your individual tracks, there's less work to do on individuals. I've heard arguments for that. I've heard arguments against that. Again, in mixing, there is no right way to do things. It's honestly how you as an individual like to mix and the end result. Do you have good results with your, the end result? And do your customers enjoy that, what you end up with? That's number one. And then you guys were kind of talking about the whole overheads and how to kind of approach overheads. First of all, you definitely want to think about drummer's perspective or audience perspective in terms of panning. Do you want to be able to sit behind the drums and hear the drums as a drummer would, or do you want to be able to sit in front of the drums and hear the drums like an audience member would? That's kind of number one. Number two, in terms of the overheads, you do usually have overheads as almost like a cymbal mic. You want to treat sometimes them as a cymbal mic, and how the drums are in a stereo field, because in addition to your overheads, you also have usually, not always, but you usually sometimes have a room mic as well, if not a stereo room mic, or multiples room mics that are being placed within the room in different spots. I've played with, putting them on the floor, putting them on the ceiling, putting them in a back corner, some people have put them in stairwells, down the hallway.
When the levee breaks, right?
Yeah, when the levee breaks. So yeah, there's multiple ways to kind of get different sounds. And then you can take those room mics and throw them through some parallel compression and just make them completely dirty, and then just kind of bring them underneath the mix. And all of a sudden you just get this powerful, crushing sound from drums. And you're like, wow, that's pretty amazing. But with stereo overheads, from what I've kind of gathered over the years, there's two ways that you can kind of approach overheads, where if you take your kick and you take your overheads and kind of just mix that, now you have that overall stereo field of how the drum sounds. And then you can bring your individual drums underneath that and bring them up to support that sound of that stereo field, to bring your toms in underneath that, to bring your snare underneath that hi-hat, the ride, and bring it underneath and kind of support what you already have drum wise through your stereo field. Or you can go the opposite way of first mixing in your kick, your snare, your toms, your hi-hat, and getting that foundation, and then bringing your overheads on top of that to just kind of detail it a little bit more. Again, there's no right way to do it. It's just a matter of experimentation and trying a bunch of different ways and seeing what you like. Yeah.
Agreed. And I would also just, what you just said, I just call that sugar and spice.
Yeah.
You can mix it and put a little sugar and spice on top of it with the overheads, or you can have the overheads be the meat and potatoes, and have everything else fill in as the sugar and spice. It just depends on what's giving you the sound, that you're looking for. One of the things that I've recently learned about mixing, especially drums, is that when I do work with the overheads, let's go back to the word we used before, panning. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll listen to that stereo overhead mix, and that'll kind of tell me where I need to pan things right away, because I listen to that stereo mix and I hear where everything's coming in from the perspective of facing the drummer. And just like what you said, that'll tell you where everything belongs in your mix as far as your panning is concerned. So you can use it either way.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about how, where you place the drums. You go back to, the Beatles, or the Stones, or any one of those old recordings back in the 60s. If you listen, drums are only in the left headphone. That's it. You take off the right headphone, and you'll only hear, it's gone. You'll only hear bass or the piano or something like that in the one headphone. So there's many ways to go about doing it. There's no right way to do it. It's just a matter of what you're kind of going for.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the whole recording process is very interesting in terms of the end result and what you're looking for, and honestly, what your client is looking for. Sometimes they know what they're looking for. Sometimes they have no idea. Sometimes they're coming to you because, you know, all they know is I've got this song, and I don't know. It's this broken down thing, and I need to make it come to life. Sometimes it's, you know, I've been working on this for years and I know exactly what it is. Actually, that's one of the things I wanted to ask you, Tynz, is how many people of your clientele come to you as an engineer versus how many people come to you as a producer?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the two lines have definitely been blurred over the years. And the first thing I do is I explain to people what exactly a producer is and what an engineer is. Because we have, you know, different meanings for different styles of music. You know, for pop and hip hop music, you know, normally the producer is just the guy that created a beat. You know, that person may have never even met the artist that's, you know, that's going over top of the music.
Yeah.
And then, you know, for other styles of music, you know, rock and you know, even anything live, you know, gospel, jazz, blues. A lot of times the producer is somebody that sits in with the band and walks them through, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. This is what I need you to do, you to do, you to do. And there's a big difference as far as the terminology is concerned. And, you know, as an engineer, I'm sure you guys have heard this before. People will just call you a producer, not really understanding the fact that you don't produce anything.
Right.
You're the actual engineer. So, you know, that's something where, you know, I get a lot of clientele where I have to, you know, walk the line. I have to blur the line a little bit. I do, you know, make sure to, you know, explain to them, you know, hey, I'm the engineer. And, you know, if there's situations that I can tackle for you, I'll be more than happy to tackle them, knock them out. But there are going to be certain situations where you may need a producer. Right. And, you know, and there's a big difference between, you know, the two titles. Now, you know, I'm an engineer that can dabble in production, but, you know, I'm not a producer. And, you know, I used to think I was a producer, but, you know, you work with a few professional producers and you find out what a producer is and you realize you're not a producer. So, you know, like I'm someone that can dabble in a little, you know, production, you know, assistance and things like that. But, you know, that actually goes back to communicating in the beginning, you know, just talking with people and saying, you know, hey, what is it that we're going for? What is our end result here? A lot of times, you know, just holidays are coming up. You know, you may get people that want to come in and just, you know, do holiday songs and things like that. It's nothing that they're really looking to release or, you know, treat too seriously. Hey, we don't need a producer for that. We can take care of that. Okay. But, you know, if this is one of your, you know, 4 or 5 albums that you're going to release in a lifetime, let's go all the way as far as we can take it. You know, let's do as much as we can do to make this as perfect and as flawless as we can make it. And, you know, that has a lot to do with, okay, maybe we need a producer in our process. It has a lot also to do with, you know, the artist knowing what they want. You know, sometimes working with an artist that knows exactly what they want is the most difficult process. The reason is because it takes a lot of your creativity out of the process, and you're more so trying to match what someone's looking for as opposed to adding your own creative touch.
Right.
You know, I had an artist come to me one time and we were working, and this actually happened. He told me, he said, I think I'm going to take my business somewhere else. And, you know, that was the first time I'd ever heard that before. So I was absolutely crushed and destroyed. And, you know, after I found out the reason why, I understood. He said, you know, to be honest with you, you know, the way you work is a little bit too intense for me. And, you know, it wasn't where I was being aggressive at all. It's just that, you know, like when we're diving into a project, I'm diving into the music, you know, let's go, you know, let's get it right. And what he was looking for was somebody to kind of play around. And, you know, that's okay. Some people, you know, that's more comfortable for them. You know, he never released a project in his life. You know, that was 10 years ago now, and never released anything. And he actually kept in contact with me because he liked the fact that I handled it with professionalism. But I actually referred him on where he could go, you know, to get somebody that would play around with him, you know. But it just, sometimes, just communicating with people and seeing what it is that they want to get out of the final process will tell you a lot about, do I need to be a producer, for some of this, or do we need to get a producer in to help us with this?
Right.
So it's the communication.
Yeah. That pre-production is extremely important. Make sure that all parties know what's going to be happening in the future, and it just makes your life as an engineer or a producer that much easier. I know what's expected out of me, and you've communicated to me, because ultimately you are my client, and I want you to be happy. I want you to be able to walk out that door at the end of the day and have a smile on your face and be happy with the end result. That's extremely important to me and you, obviously.
Yeah. And to touch on what you just said, a lot of time, well, not a lot of times, but anytime I've ever lost clientele, it was due to communication or lack of communication, where, something that they were expecting out of the process is not what they were getting. For instance, I had an artist come to me and he had a ton of songs, and, and I'm thinking that he understood that we're a recording studio. We're not going to not for free, produce tracks for you. So, he came in and was under the assumption that when he walked in, we would just have 5,000 tracks for him to listen to and go through and just be able to pick one and record over.
Oh,
and
the
that's
beats
when
and stuff. Okay.
Yeah, and that's when I explained to him, producers need to get paid for their time.
Right.
I can't ask a producer to come in here and help you, or, even make tracks for you and everything, and they're just doing it for fun. But to be honest, it was something that he really thought was part of recording studios. And,
right.
And that's where I had to explain to him that any studio in the country that you go to, if they're going to give you music, they're going to want to get paid for their music, because that artist that created that music has to get compensated for it.
Absolutely.
And that's communication, so anytime, Joe, that I've ever lost, any artist, it's been because of a lack of communication. And I always take responsibility for that and refund the money in that situation.
It's incredible. I didn't realize that was the defining factor between a producer in hip hop versus rock. And like making, I meet these people. I'm out and about in the community, and somebody will find out I'm a musician. I'll be like, oh, I make beats. Like if you ever need a beat. And to me, I mean, I'm a musician. I know I don't have the need to buy somebody's beat from them. So it's funny to hear, like, I guess if you were rapping or singing over it and you didn't have any technical skills, to make your own beats or to find a band to record, it would be necessary.
Yeah.
But I mean, I do it on Ableton because I don't have my own drum kit, and I'm working on a track right now, and I can record my own bass and guitar and piano and vocals and anything else I need, but I don't have a drum kit. It's not that hard. I mean, you can do it on GarageBand.
Yeah, but there are people out there that just do not have they just don't want to spend their time behind a computer. They want to be writing lyrics out and spitting rhymes, and and that's their focus. That's what they want. You do all that stuff. I just want to be I want to be me. I want to be the artist. There's a lot of people who are like that.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to say, I don't want to offend anybody who's like a master beat maker, but you can go on, if you have the proper software, you can make something, you can get on there and you just, start with your kick on the downbeat each time, and then start adding a snare on the two.
Yeah, but you're a musician. That it's easy for you. You're going off of knowledge that you've had for years. There are people out there that just doesn't make sense.
Excellent point, because I was just getting ready to say, Joe, what happens sometimes is people will underestimate our own talents. And, and what happens is that, for some people, what you just said is absolutely a totally different language. And, they couldn't understand it at all. And that's okay. Because there's a lot of things that other people do that I don't understand. And exactly. I don't mind, just, hey, you do that. You take care of that, because I don't understand that.
Yeah.
But, when it comes to, producing tracks and things like that, it's gotten to the point now where it's actually gotten sad, because, a lot of times the producers are getting cut out. People are going on YouTube and just downloading tracks and converting them. And me, to be honest, I always give them the warning, your music is not your music. You can't sell this. You can't release this. You can't do, as soon as you try to take this to somebody, they're going to say, well, where'd you get the music? Get out of my office. And like, you know, and that's how this is going to work. And, you know, a lot of times they just don't care. And, you know, that's kind of where, you know, things have gotten so saturated now that, you know, people are okay with problems that are going to arise like that. They just want to kind of, you know, again, unfortunately play around. So, you know, there's definitely a huge difference, you know, in the title producer. But unfortunately, kind of on both sides, the producers are starting to get cut out of the equation. And it's really unfortunate because it is making it's damaging the music and the quality of music that we're hearing right now.
Yeah, people are sampling stuff all the time, pulling from everybody, man. It's like, I mean, it's too easy nowadays. And I think because it's too easy nowadays and people are not educating themselves on the process, that, you know, if you pull a sample from somebody without their permission and you get any notoriety, you're looking for a lawsuit coming your way, and you don't realize that that's going to happen. And you're looking, you know, lawyers' fees and a bunch of headache coming your way. Whereas just do it right the first time. Hire somebody who knows what they're doing, who owns their own rights to their own beats, their own samples, or make your own library. I mean, if you're into it, make your own library and start your own. And that way you're safe. But as soon as you start pulling things from other people off the internet, it's a real shady area, and you don't want to go down that route, man.
Yes. And I mean, the thing is, it really what it boils down to is a word I hate using, but it's the truth. It's laziness. It boils down to laziness. You know, like people just want to get to the end result as opposed to doing the process correctly so that they have an opportunity for the end result to be successful. So, you know, a lot of times, like I said, people just, I hate saying this, but a lot of times people just want to let people know that they're in the studio. And you know, and you can tell that by the fact that every time they get a call, they answer it and say, hey, I'm in the studio. Well, why are you answering the phone?
Right.
You know, like we're here to make music. We're here to make brilliance. Why are you answering the phone? I'm not answering my phone. So why are you answering yours?
Yeah, you're right.
And you know, and the reason why they're answering it, hey, I'm in the studio. I'll call you back. Voicemail could have done that for you. You know, but it's unfortunate. And you know, I don't want it to be, you know, where, you know, to feel like, you know, it's something where we're getting to the point where we're tired of it. It's just that we get to the point where we just want it to be about the music like it used to be. You know, I think a lot of times people get, you know, kind of get it backwards where they're feeling like, you know, we just are not happy with the new era of music. It's nothing to do with that. It's just that a lot of the new era of music doesn't really focus on music as much as it does as the end result. And that's why the music is definitely suffering right now, you know, in all genres. The music, the creation is suffering right now, and the engineers are on the front line of that battle. So, you know, we see it first. And, you know, and it's definitely unfortunate, but, you know, you do get some people coming in that are still about the music, and those are the customers you're going to discount. And I mean, I hate to put it like that, but you are going to discount them because you love to work with them. You can't wait until they come back to the studio and record again. You're so excited to work with them because they love the music and they love what they're doing. And, you know, whatever the style of music is, you don't care. They just care about the music. They're happy to be there, and they're happy to be sitting beside you, and you guys are going in together to make something beautiful.
That actually brings up something I wanted to ask you. How do you feel about having the client with you in the room versus doing it on your own?
I normally will start the mix on my own if possible, and then have them come and sit with me to get it right. I just got finished doing a project, and the guy, you know, he normally would bring 3 or 4 people with him. But, you know, one was his manager, one was his creative consultant, you know, whatever. And then he had, you know, another guy, and he would ask them what they think throughout the process. What would happen is that everybody would have a different opinion, and we're chasing opinions.
I made
a killing off of the fact that, hey, we're going to continue to change this mix. So every time, we get somewhere, we're going right back to where we started from. And that's what's going to happen when you're mixing in a circle.
Yeah.
I generally, finally I told them, and I didn't wait. I told them in the beginning, I said, mixing this way is going to take you guys a ton of time. What would be more beneficial for you guys is that I do the mix. You guys critique what you like and don't like, come up with a mutual opinion and bring that mutual opinion back to me to get it right. But when they're sitting in the room with you, you're going to get, the bass player is going to say, hey, can you turn that bass up just a little bit? And then the drummer is going to say, hey, can you turn that kick drum up just a little bit? And next thing you know, you're peeking out in the red on every track.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens a lot of times. What I generally would say is when I'm working with a solo artist, I don't really have much problem with them sitting with me when I'm mixing.
Right.
If that's what they choose to do. Of course, just like anyone else, I prefer to mix by myself so nobody will bother me.
Right.
Asking questions or talking to you or anything, and I don't mind the questions. I don't mind the conversation. It's just, for their music, it's probably better if I focus.
Right.
But, when I'm mixing with the group of people, what ends up happening is that we end up having this, contest, and things continue to get louder and louder and louder. And eventually you get to the point where now you're having to turn everything back down. And, and it's kind of like, it's just a waste of time because a lot of opinions aren't going to help you on the mix. You hear what you hear. Yeah. And that's the reason why they're there. So, the first half of the project we did that way. I'd say it probably took us to get through 5 songs, well over 100 hours. Oh, ridiculous. Wow. The second half of the project probably took us 20 hours total. Right. And that's when I finally went to them and said, hey, I personally, I appreciate you guys' payments. Don't get me wrong, but I can't work this way because I'm not getting from these mixes what I think we need to get from these mixes. And I'm getting to the point now where I go home and don't feel good inside here because I don't feel like I'm doing the service for you guys that I need to be doing if you guys are going to compensate me. Right. So, and the thing I've learned about most engineers is that, we're not money hungry guys. We just want to make sure that what you pay us for, we hand over to you. And, and that's, of course, that's not 100%, but, 99% of, what I've met, we all feel the same way. We're not fancy guys where we need to, we're just looking at every hour, another hour, another payment, no, we're more so about the music. That's why we do what we do.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And, and it gets to the point where you just feel like, okay, well, I'm not doing what they're paying me for. And I know that if I'm not giving them what they're paying me for, eventually they're going to stop paying me. So I'd rather have a little bit, not even a little bit, but I'd rather get paid fairly, I guess I should say, than not get paid at all. Right. And, and eventually what's going to happen is they're going to think that you're the problem. And that's what I had to learn, is that even when other people are the problem, you have to assume that in their mind, you're the problem. And you have to correct that throughout the process as you go along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other week, when Joe and I started this process, I had mentioned how the artist needs to do their homework in terms of who they're hiring as their producer / engineer, because you're coming to me for a reason. You could have gone to anybody, but you're coming to me because of the things that I put out. You are coming to me because you enjoy the quality, the vision that I have in my mixes, because no two engineers are the same in terms of what they produce as a mix. I like to believe that you are coming to me because you believe in my vision, my quality, the thing that I'm producing, that I'm giving to you on the other end. So ultimately, let me do my job.
Yes.
Yes, obviously give me feedback, but believe in me and my ability to do what I do best and let me do it. Because then I'm going to be able to give you what you want. Right. And you as the artist, and I truly believe this, every artist needs to do their homework before they hire anybody is to go out and listen to somebody's catalog and see what it is that they have to offer. And if you like that sound, absolutely hire them. That's what you're going to get. You know, you can't hire Joe and expect, you know, to get, you know, CLA or anything like that. You have to know what you're getting into. You have to. You can't just go to somebody and say, I'm looking for Michael Jackson and you're going to give it to me. No, that's not how it works. That's just not how it works.
Not how it works. And that's the thing is, again, going back to communication, you know, just communicating with your artists and letting them know, hey, this is what you can expect. Yeah. And that way their expectations at the end of the process aren't beyond what you're going to be able to give to them. And, you know, there's been times when, you know, people have brought things to me and I've, you know, turned it away and said, you know, I don't think that I'll be able to work on your project.
Right.
And, you know, the first thing they're going to ask you is, wow, what's wrong with me? There's nothing in the world wrong with you. What it is that you've brought me something and the expectations that you want to get from this, I can't achieve.
Right.
And it's not where I don't tell them that nobody can achieve it. I'll just say I can't achieve it.
Right.
And, you know, and I think a lot of times turning away that situation will actually come back to you. Because what happened is when I told the guy that, he brought me some recordings that he had done. And, you know, what his expectations were did not match the recordings that he brought to me. And first thing I asked him, I said, are you open to re-recording this? Well, you know, the band's all over the place now. I don't think we'll be able to re-record it. No problem. Okay. What are your expectations from this? He wanted it to sound professional and be ready for, you know, big time release. And he already had his release date and everything. And, you know, oh yeah, big mistakes. And
never have a release date before you have a master. Ever. People don't ever do that.
Don't ever do it. And, you know, and that was a situation where and then of course I asked about his budget, you know, and the three things just weren't feasible together. Right. And, you know, and that was a situation where I said, you know, I'm actually going to have to decline this project. You know, as much as I would like to do business with you, you seem like a straightforward guy, straight shooter and everything. I would love to work with you, but what your expectations are don't match your budget. They don't match the work that you've done so far, and they don't match the talent of the band that you've recorded with. And he went to another studio and he got mixes and masters done and, you know, paid them a ton of money. And, you know, we bumped into each other in Guitar Center. And it, you know, just random bumped into each other. And, you know, he's like, hey, man, do you have a card? I want to get back in touch with you. And I said, you know, no problem. Gave him my card. I said, how did that project turn out? And he said, man, you were so right. He said, everything you said was 100% correct. And of course, you know, us being men, we love to hear that anyway. You know what I mean?
Right.
But, you know, I felt bad for the guy and I asked him what happened. And basically what he said was that, you know, he took it somewhere. The guy took his money and, you know, the guy spent time mixing it and mastering it. But what he got back didn't sound much better than what he took there. And, you know, and he said, you know, just with the amount of time and money that we put into that, I would have thought that it was going to be a major, major improvement.
Right.
And, you know, and that's where I kind of explained to him on the process, you know, sometimes if you've started so far behind zero, a lot of what we're doing is just to get you to zero.
Yeah.
Like we're not taking you up to, you know, a 10. We're just taking you up to a 0. And, you know, at that point, when you go and compare that 0 with somebody that's at a 10, you understand what a 0 is. And, you know, and that's exactly what happened. Basically, the guy did mixes and masters on his work, took him up to about a 0 because they were so far behind. They were at a -9, Joe. And he got them up to 0. But he couldn't get them any further than that because there's only so much you can do with something that comes to you and doesn't sound, you know, the way it's supposed to sound anyway. And yeah, he blew his whole budget, you know, lost all contact with the band. He's on his own again. And, you know, we actually started recording this morning at 6 o'clock. So yeah, that's where I was at this morning at 6 a.m.
That brings us full circle here.
Yeah, full circle.
Probably a good place to wrap up here because I think we've covered a lot of information. We could talk about this for for days. But,
yes, we could.
Yes, we can.
Tynz, it was awesome having you on the show, man.
Oh, you too, man. Let's do it again. We'll talk more about the details of mixing and mastering, Joe, because I know we got off kill, but I think we covered some good information today.
Yeah. So if you're even if you're not in the Northern Virginia, DC area, Tynz owns and records the lead engineer at District Entertainment in Alexandria, Virginia. You can work with him remotely, or if you're in the area, you can go visit him.
Yeah. Where can they go, Tynz, to get a hold of your information?
DErecording.com. Everything's there. I'm on Instagram at Tynz_DE. And everything you need right there on the website, though. All the information, everything from pricing to previous works that we've done. Albino Rhino is on there, my man Joe.
Yes.
And I appreciate you guys having me on. I just like to talk shop, man.
Awesome.
I just love it. This is what I do. Like most engineers, I had a different life goal, and I ended up falling into music, and I'm never going to try to get out of it. I love it. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well,
thank you guys. You guys keep doing what you guys are doing. This is beautiful, man. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you.
All right.
Awesome. Have a good night, guys.
All right. You too.